clap for yourself also for taking actually Manyavar to the university system. So I think because we have been actually having Baba Saheb Ambedkar's birth anniversary and Baba Saheb must have also come. I think that bouquet is now coming to this level as well. As far as the title of the today's talk is concerned, that democratizing hierarchical societies, learning to end caste resistance of Bahujan leader Kanshi Ram. I don't know actually when you were thinking to organize this lecture, the topic. You were thinking to organize as a PhD program, that because this title is itself a PhD title, and to speak in limited time it's very difficult. But when I was going through the title, I found that there are 6 variables in the title. And as a teacher, I began with looking at, of course, you are talking about democratizing hierarchical societies, but if you go by the conceptual categories, there are 6 variables starting from democracy, hierarchy, caste, resistance, leadership, and boundaries. And therefore, friends, it's very, very, very difficult to club all these 6 variables and then reach to a conclusion. But no doubt the topic itself is conclusive, because the conclusion which you draw is that with the resistance movement of the Bahujan, you can democratize hierarchically arrange a society on the basis of the caste. So I think that is a very, very important to take away at the outset. You have given the conclusive title. But this title can be also understood independently, with each variables having its own epistemology as well as ontology, and this can be brought together and then can create a epithet or a whole critical premise. But to begin with, I need to engage with few of the variables. One of the variables which I would like to, of course, highlight is democracy. And because democracy is a cliche and it has been used in a number of ways, and therefore we need to understand how I'm going to use the term democracy. So as you all know that democracy comes from the 2 epithets. Demos, that is a Greek term, demos meaning people, and kratos means power. So that means people's power. That was classical Greek understanding. And then democracy went on to actually talk about that how people in Greek polis especially, democracy was used as the name of the constitution in which poorer people exercised power in their own interest, and poor people exercised their power in their interest against the rich and the aristocratic rich. And therefore, we are very much interested in looking at how in India democracy has been used by the not poor people but especially excluded category. There is also a tendency to understand democracy with the help of Aristotelian understanding, Mills, Tocqueville, Rousseau, Robert Dahl, Lipset, and so on and so forth. But not to bore you today because it's not a theoretical class, so I'm not going into that detail. But at least, we can arrive at consensus that the final definition of democracy is yet to arrive. it's not there. But even then, Lipset has tried to argue that in a complex society, according to Lipset, SM Lipset I'm talking about, democracy is a political system. And this political system supplies regular constitutional opportunities for changing governing officials. That is, it gives you an opportunity to change the governing officials. And as a social mechanism, it permits the largest possible part of the population to influence the major decisions by choosing among the candidates of the political office. So that means it's a very clear-cut definition where you can choose certain people to look at the office and there you can apply. But when we come to India now, we can see that according to T.K. Uman, he is arguing that in Greece and India, democracy at the grassroots levels was very much there since millennium. And especially when we take the example of India, Gram Sabha is said to be democracy, which is known as direct democracy. But that is not conducive, because in direct democracy in India, especially in Gram Sabha, the aristocratic people, the upper strata, the choice born dominated, and the lower strata and untouchables were excluded. And therefore, we can argue that direct democracy is not fit for complex societies at the higher level. At the lower level, fine, you can at the local level, fine, but at the higher level and at the macro level, direct democracies do not function. Now, coming to the definition, modern little bit definition of Kaviraj, and Kaviraj talks about the representative democracy is important, And representative democracy was a process of creating modernity. Now, he has not talked about what type of modernity, whether first world modernity or second world modernity or third world modernity, what type of modernity, but he says that modernity because I am a modernity not of a singular modernity. For me, there are multiple modernities, and modernities have different sources and foundation. For example, first world modernity came of industrial revolution, and the second world modernity came of ideological revolution, and the third world modernity has come out of revolution against colonialism. So therefore, there is not one source of modernity. Even in Europe, if you see how modernity emerged in France and how modernity emerged in Europe, in London, that's a different word altogether. But what is more important is that with the developmental planning, secularization, and elimination of the caste practices, I think in favor of common modern citizenship, that is the hallmark of representative democracy. Now, therefore, this variable, democracy, is, I would take, is overarching variable in your title, and which goes into the other variables, and this brings me to the second and the third variable, and I will use a hierarchy and caste. So if you go by very simplest of the definition of the hierarchy, that means it is a type of stratification system where people are located in a ladder from top to bottom with their privileges and also disprivileges. Because disprivileges are very important in a hierarchical system. And hierarchy, caste hierarchy is one of the worst form of hierarchy, because in Western society, European society, if you see the class divisions, there may be hierarchy on the basis of class, but not the type of groups which we have. And the caste hierarchy, before I come to definition of the caste, I take Baba Saheb Ambedkar's definition that caste is nothing but a group formed on the basis of endogamy. Rest are the characteristics which have been highlighted, which I do not hold as actual characteristics of the caste. But if you take Seattle, or if you take London, or if you take America, or now Canada, what is caste? Caste is in a form of stratification system in diaspora. Caste is basically a interactional unit, and it cushions the pain and alienation of the people who migrate from their motherland. And because of actually their alienation, that gives them cushion, and then they try to identify their own group with their own identity. Now one can ask that why people and how caste has migrated to diaspora. I think it's a very simple exercise which I do, that when people migrate, they do not migrate as a biological soul. They migrate with their social and cultural capital as well, and caste being their capital, they migrate with caste, and that's why caste is in diaspora. Now, having said this, let me come to the other aspect, and that is the fourth variable, and that is Bahujan. So, with democracy leaving apart, with hierarchy and caste, a binary in Indian society was carved out by Manyavar Kanshi Ram. And this binary is basically on the basis of the majority of the people, and majority and minority. The Bahujans means majority, but he has an 85% of the population in Bahujans on the basis of their different other categories, the scheduled caste, the scheduled tribes, other backward classes, and converted minorities. The term converted minorities is very important because they are not Ashraf, they are not Azlam, they are Azars. The lowest strata converted to Islam, and also Christianity as well as Sikhism. And because Kanshiram himself came from Sikhism, he had this in mind that there are minorities who have converted not only to Islam but other religions as well. So this 85% of the population, according to Kanshiram and his colleagues, constitutes Bahujan. Now this Bahujan is important for us because then he traces the history. He traces the history of the Bahujans, and in ancient India he travels to 6th century BC with Buddha, and in Middle Ages he comes to Ravidas, and in modern times, the colonial India, he comes to Jyotiba Narayana Guru, Jyotiba Phule, Mata Savitribai Phule, Shiva Sauji Maharaj, Ramaswamy Naikar Periyar, and of course, Bodhisattva Baba Saheb Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar. And with these actually historical antecedents, it carves out a very, very different and very noble type of movement. I will say with 4 I's, that is idioms, new iconography, new ideology, and new identity. Now these 4 I's were basically constituting the organization. So we can see that how Manyavar Kanshi Ram's politics is blessed with Baba Saheb Ambedkar's contribution of the constitution, because when Baba Saheb Ambedkar was organizing his political parties, starting from 1936 independent labor parties, 1942 scheduled confederation, and laying down the foundation of Republican Party of India, he did not have constitutional mechanism to his disposal, and therefore the democracy, as per as constitutional democracy, constitutional representative democracy, was not there. Now, under these circumstances, Baba Sahib Ambedkar's mobilization pattern and his slogan and his organization and his iconography was quite limited, because his iconography was limited to Buddha, Jyotiba Phule, and Kabir, as he himself has written. But Kashiram was, endured with this, because you know that for the first meeting on the organization which he wanted to establish was 14th of October 1971. Now that means Constitution has functioned for 21 years, and there was a jolt or breaking of the slumber of the democracy, the type of celebration which Indians had made with the development of democracy, that now it is the British have gone and now we have a constitution in place and everything is going to be pink. But what was happening? Instead of democracy, the exclusion, instead of the constitutional mechanism enshrined in the Indian Constitution, especially reservations, Article 330, 332, 335. Now, all these have already taken function for 2 decades, and within 2 decades, the Dalits, the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, and other backward classes, they all started realizing that instead of getting the reaping the fruits of the constitution, they are being excluded. And especially, you look at 6 very important institutions. I call it as modern institutions based on universalistic principle: judiciary, bureaucracy, university, industry, civil society. Now, these institutions were supposed to function on universalistic principles. That means representation should be given to them in these institutions. But as the hierarchy of the Indian society was present in the religious as well as social realm, it was depicted in the secular realm. So it was either judiciary, bureaucracy, polity, university, civil society, everywhere we could see the exclusion. Now, under these circumstances, we all know that Baba Sahib Ambedkar had already talked about self-representation, and when he wanted to evolve the democracy, he had a vision, and I quote from him at least one important aspect. In 1990, when he was actually giving a representation to the South World Committee, he argued, and I quote, "As the government is the most important field for the exercise of individual capacity." I repeat, as the government is the most important field for the exercise of individual capacities, it is in the interest of the people that no person as such should be denied the opportunity of actively participating in the process of that government. I think for Baba Sahib Ambedkar, a democracy will be representative only when people participate in the process of the government. And friends, it is very important to note that this was talking about self-representative. He said that representation of the opinion is not the hallmark of the good government. A good government is that which gives self-representation as well. And friends, there were not one or two reasons for self-representation, but there were a number of reasons. I just want to give few reasons that why he wanted self-representation. Now, as I have told you already, the government is a space where, where people come and harness their capacity and capability, and therefore one needs very important representation. As my friend, Arvind keeps on telling that there is a Aristotelian class who talks about there is a governing class and there is actually non-governing class. So I think Baba Saheb Ambedkar must have thought that how these people, Tilak had talked about what Kulbats will do by going to the parliament. They always nurse this idea that a Dalit cannot be ruling. And I think that's why that must have been the thought that Baba Saheb Ambedkar wanted, that there should be self-representation of the people. The second, how you will reason for self-representation. How will you establish a democracy if you don't give self-representation to the people? Then what will happen? If there is only one class which is represented in the institutions of governance, production, introduction, or education, then what will happen? One class will always be ruler and others will be ruled. Therefore, if you want to change this pattern of rule and ruler, then representation should be equally distributed. Then only there will be a proper democracy. Those who are ruled, if they become ruler, then they will also make the rule of the law for the others. And then others will also be thinking, oh, tomorrow they will come to the power, then what will happen? Now, the third way that you have to have self-representation was a moral reason, moral reason for giving the self-representation. And Baba Saheb Ambedkar quoted Gopal Krishna Gokhale. Gopal Krishna Gokhale in 1885 had given a representation to the British government of that time. And while giving his representation, he said that, look, dwarfing and stunting of Indians is taking place because they are not given representation in the British bureaucracy. Their tallest of the tall is not able to achieve their quota of manhood. Baba Saheb Ambedkar said, British government is only 150 years old, and within 150 years old you are losing your total manhood, you are losing your capacity and capability. What about us? You have not given us self-representation for thousands of years. And therefore, friends, there he argued that there is a moral reason for self-representation to the Dalits. And therefore, keeping this in mind, I think the last aspect can be self-representation, that only bearer of the shoe knows where it reaches. So those people, and Baba Saheb Ambedkar went on to quote actually Lenin, that how if you really want to strengthen the democracy, then the people, the officers who are charged with the calling of the democracy, they should only be given representation. Otherwise, those who are status quo, they will never implement the democratic rights. And in this context, I think it's very important that how Islam had developed movement. And therefore, there are 5 very important principles to understand Kanshi Ram's movement. And Kanshi Ram, this I have collected from his writings and his speeches. The first principle is, he argued that if you want to change the society, you have to understand this society. And therefore, he argued that I have to do the field work. And he uses the term field work. And he says that when I was doing the field work, I met an American girl. You know who? It was Gail Bates. 1971, we met Gail Bates, who was doing research on Jyotiba Phule. And then he says that, look, I am thankful to Gail Bates that, look, she has shown me that there is a Bahujan leader who has fought for the rights of the excluded, and therefore he included him in the pantheon. So I think the field work was very important, and that is why when he went to Kerala, he brought Narayana Guru. When he went to Tamil Nadu, he brought T.V. Ramaswamy Naikar Periyar, Kumar Hasan, and also he saw how the Bahujan movement functioned in Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and also Bihar. So field work is very important to understand the society if you really want to change the society. Now, when he was doing his field work, he met one of the very important slogans which he used to say that he went to Maharashtra, and in Maharashtra, the people, so the Ambedkarites, they were basically talking. They were talking that, Ambedkari दादा चांगली आहे पर शपथ हा शकत नाही. Ambedkarism is a very nice ideology, but it will never be successful. That dictum, Kanshi Ram brought that I have understood the movement, that why it is happening and where it is happening. The second principle which he talked about was people get the leaders which they deserve. So, he argued that in democracy it is the people who select the leaders. It is not the leaders who select the people. It is not the leaders who choose the people. It is the people who choose the leader. And therefore, please stop castigating your leaders. Leader is bad, leader is this, leader is that. Please stop that. If you really want to change, please change yourself. And I think, this counter public is very, very important concept. Whether it is actually, anyone, the social sciences, whether Habermas or others, you can say that. So he wanted to conscientize people that you have to change. The third very important principle which he started talking about was the societies whose non-political roots are weak. Societies whose non-political roots are weak, their politics will never be successful. So if you really want to make your politics successful, then your non-political roots should be strong. Now, what are these non-political roots? And non-political roots, of course, are understanding the history, the social history of your whole movement. And that is where he started going to the movements launched by the Bahujan leaders. And he used to say that the leader has been 156 years old. 108 years old. 1848 to 1956. Baba Saheb Ambedkar passed away in 1956 and Phule started his movement in 1848. So you can just say that this movement is this much year old, and we have to understand who are the people who have made the difference in the movement. So that was the third principle. I can go on that to make his non-political roots. He said that it cannot be done. It has to be done through an organization. And to strengthen the non-political roots, he formed a concept. Backward and Minorities Communities Employees Federation. And this movement was not launched like that. They first met on 14th of October 1971, and then they said, okay, we are going to organize people. After 2 years in 1973, 6th December 1973, they met again, and they said that we will do 5 years of research. We will do 5 years of research and then relaunch it. This organization to strengthen our non-political roots. And therefore, friends, on 6th of December 1978, they met again. And, they carved out different types of formulas. I just want to give you one or two formulas so that you can see that how this movement was scientific in nature. The first formula is N into D into S is equal to C. N into D into S is equal to C. Need into desire into strength is equal to change. Now, Kanshi Ram argued, Manyavar used to argue that there is a need for change. But is there desire? So how you will actually create a desire among the people? And then if you have need and desire and you don't have strength, then what will happen? And strength is of both the kind. The financial strength as well as the human resource. Both has to be there. And therefore, friends, he said that we have to create this. The second formula was M into M into M is equal to O. Mind into money into man is equal to organization. So man is of mind and mind of actually mind with the money. All the three are important to create an organization. And third, he argued that to launch action, you have to have 3 steps in your mind. 3 steps to launch an action. Action will create a reaction, and if you have thought a counter action, then and only launch an action. Action, reaction, and counter action are the 3 fulcrum on the basis of which you have to launch an action. And the fourth one was positive agenda. Reaction should not be there, because reaction spoils your time, money and energy. And do not set your own agenda. So if you want to shorten a line, don't rub it. Don't shorten a line by rubbing it. Draw a bigger line in front of it, the other line will be shortened. That was his basic agenda. And said that look, our people, they keep on talking about, Manusmriti, they will keep on talking about molten lead in their ears, cutting the tongue and all this. But this is a negative agenda. Our opponent is so strong, so powerful, that even if he is not there, he comes and sits with us. We have organized a very good meeting, and there we discuss Manusmriti. We discuss Rig Veda, Sam Veda, and we criticize the Brahmins. That means our opponent is very strong. Even though we have organized our meeting for ourselves, he comes and sits with us without doing anything, and he is present with us. And therefore, never have a negative agenda. Always have a positive agenda. The last actually point, there are many others. Pay back to society. I think pay back to society is a very moralistic principle which we do not find in any of the movement. And pay back to society was a deliberate attempt. And here, I was looking at Jeffrey Alexander, and Jeffrey Alexander's latest concept of civil sphere. Civil sphere, in which actually Jeffrey Alexander, the cultural sociologist of Yale University, talks about that how civil sphere creates values and institutions which generates capacity of social criticism and democratic integration. Now this is, I think, I like fantastic gelling with Baumsen. Baumsen was a civil sphere which generated the capacity for social criticism. ठाकुर ब्राह्मण बनिया छोड़ बाकी सब है DSP. I think one of the very important takeaway for me, for Jeffrey Alexander, was that it has created value, it has created institutions, and it has generated capacity and integration. I think Baumsen was a moral principle of values which was the first time being asked that you have to pay back. The middle classes, those who have benefited from the reservation policy, they have to be paid back, because you have benefited because of your membership from the community. And now, because of that, you have got reservation and therefore you have to pay back to society. Now, I think with these, actually, he also had programs of Mela on Wheels with and actually, covering 9 states. With these little efforts, he created a counter public, and counter public which was ready to take his slogans into stride. And gradually, for 3 years, he tried to strengthen the non-political root of the counter. Now, after 3 years, he said, okay, now your political are strong. That does not mean that people will give you power. They are not going to give you power in platter. And therefore he made the 4th principle. The 4th principle was power will be product of struggles. And mind you, I am not, concocting this principle, and these are not my words. I have taken these words from Manyavar Kanshi Ram's vocabulary himself, and he used this vocabulary. Power will be product of struggles. Now, we know that actually he had developed the organization called BAMSEP, which was a employees association, and employees were governed by civil services conduct rule, and therefore they were not allowed to be doing sit-ups, or they were not allowed to be going dharna or production. Therefore he said that I need this organization. BAMSEP is a class organization. I need a mass organization, and that is where he established BS4. And BS4, if you see the writer of BS4, how he used to write BS4, that is also, that shows that how his BS4 was written as a valency. The 4 was written as a valency, and that also proved the point that he was a scientist. He was a practitioner scientist, and he was actually leading a lot of tests in Kirti. So in that context, I think BS4, Dalit Soshit Samaj Sangharsh Samiti, I think this was a mass organization, and through this he launched not many programs which were confrontationist in nature. Confrontationist in the nature, that means, one of the important program he launched was Sharab Bandi Andolon, and he used to say that I just want to use this epithet because it rhymes very well. He says that अमीरों की बस्ती में खोले जाते हैं स्कूल, अमीरों की बस्ती में खोले जाते हैं स्कूल, मुसलमानों की बस्ती में खोले जाते हैं थाना, और दलितों की बस्ती में खोला जाता है शराब खाना. That is a design. That is a design to make people drink. Instead of saving the money to build their movement and organization, they are being forced to drink liquor, and that is why he launched this movement, Jail Bharo Andolan, and actually thousands of people got arrested in Bareilly. That is known as Bareilly March. The second movement, of course, was a long drive, miracle of 2 feet and 2 wheels. That okay, we do not have motors, we do not have bicycles, but we have cycles and we have 2 feet. And that's why he gave a very catchy slogan, miracle of 2 feet and 2 wheels. And therefore he launched a bicycle from Kashmir to Kanyakumari and from Porbandar to Kohima. So length and breadth, that is 3,900 kilometers, 3,500 kilometers bicycle at the age of 50. And he said that when I drove this cycle, at the age of 50, I asked the young people, अरे मैं 50 साल का 3,500 किलोमीटर चलाता हूँ, तुम 50 किलोमीटर नहीं चला सकते? And that was the moral dilemma again, which was pressurized to the young people, and young people started coming to it. Another very, catchy movement was, a political escape was taking place. People's Parliament. People's Parliament was very, very innovative movement. It started in front of the Indian Parliament at the Boat Club. And he argued that, look, we are not able to enter into Parliament, but we can at least understand what happens and how Parliament functions. So why I am trying to underline this movement is this, how he tried to convince the disheartened people without any hope, how he was convincing that, look, we can enter in Parliament, and what happens in Parliament, he made where are the trustee benches and where are the opposition benches, and how the bills are passed, how they are moved, and how they are voted. With these little concepts, actually, Manyavar Kanshi Ram again galvanized his masses. Now, after 3 years, that means, launching his class movement, Bamsar, and after 3 years of launching of his mass movement, Kanshi Ram gave the 5th principle. And the 5th principle was that when people oppose succeed, when people who oppose succeed will be asked to propose. They will be asked to propose. That means it is not only for the reaction that I am launching a movement. I have a proposal. And what is my proposal? This proposal actually is, this proposal was, very democratic proposal, which I'm going to tell you. And at least 4 slogans. 4 slogans prove the point that his whole movement was democratic and constitutional. Democratic and constitutional. He never left democracy and constitution. Now the first was, वोट हमारा राज तुम्हारा नहीं चलेगा. Our vote and your rule no longer. I think that is a very democratic appeal, because as far as vote is concerned, it is a democratic right, and rule, of course, democratic rule, no longer. The second slogan was, वोट से लेंगे पीएम सीएम, आरक्षण से लेंगे एसपीडीएम. वोट से लेंगे पीएम सीएम, आरक्षण से लेंगे एसपीडीएम. From vote, we will take PM and CM, and mind you, he has taken CM. PM की बारी अभी बाकी है. And from reservation, we will take SP and DM. And he used to say that जिनके सीएम होते हैं उन्हीं के डीएम होते हैं. अगर आपका सीएम नहीं है तो आपका डीएम नहीं होगा. So I think it's very important, he said, that you have to make your CM first, and DM will be there because Baba Saheb already given you the rights, reservation. Baba Saheb has given you one man, one vote, one value. The only thing is that you have to use it. Now the third very important slogan was, जिसकी जितनी संख्या भारी उसकी उतनी हिस्सेदारी. जिसकी जितनी संख्या भारी, each according to the percentage of population. The minority people should not be governing. The minority people should be given the representation according to the proportion of their vote. And therefore, friends, when I look at these slogans, all the 4 slogans, they are democratic in nature. democratic in nature. And from there onwards, he said one of the very important, very conclusive argument, one of the very important and conclusive argument that was my movement is based on economic emancipation and social transformation. Economic emancipation and social transformation. Now he is very clear that he doesn't want he doesn't want actually social change. He wants social transformation. Because social change is a gradual phenomenon where the system remains the same, where the structure remains the same, and there is percolation of certain lodges. But transformation is the change of the guard. And therefore he said that self-representation of Baba Saheb Ambedkar is very necessary. हमारा सीएम होगा तो हमारा डीएम होगा और हमारा डीएम होगा तो हमारा पॉलिसी होगा और हमारा प्रोग्राम होगा. Now there actually you know that he has actually 4 times Bahudar Samaj Party came to power, and that's where I use again Jeffrey Alexander's concept that civil sphere can lead to civil repair. Civil sphere can lead to civil repair. And I think, this Bahujan Samaj and Bahujan Samaj Party which was formed, this again was a movement given birth by Bamsek through PS4, which led to different types of iconography, ideology, and in a sense I call it as strengthening of Indian democracy. At the zenith, it had 6 crores vote. 6 crores vote. That means the 6 crore vote were brought to the democratic institution, and they could exercise their right of casting their vote. That means he brought them in the circle of the democracy. I think I have exhausted my time. So what I will just stop here with one anecdote that the construction, when he was constructing one very important building, and that was Parivartan Chowk, the social change crossing Parivartan Chowk. And he argued that, look, I have argued social transformation, which was a slogan, which was an abstract slogan. But this Parivartan Chowk, which is standing, is concrete. And therefore, my abstract slogans have started getting converted into empirical and physical sphere. And that's why Ambedkar Chowk to Gautam Buddha Vishwavidyalaya, and there are actually across 7 universities. That is a different story. But with this empirical data, we can argue that how hierarchical society was democratized, and the land which is considered now as Rama land, there is a book issued by the government at that time, that Uttar Pradesh cradle of Buddhism. Uttar Pradesh is the cradle of Buddhism. It is not Rama land according to him. So therefore, friends, I think the totality of iconography, totality of ideology, identity, and as well as institution and idiom, I think were changed, and that is why we can say that democracy was strengthened, and of course, Baba Saheb's constitution was strengthened, and nation was strengthened as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for profoundly mapping out the wider horizon of social political imagery of Manyavar Kanshi Ram. Now we have with us Dr. Shailesh apologies not introducing him again like earlier. So like he's recently defended his PhD, and he has been also Commonwealth Fellow, like prestigious Commonwealth Fellow previously, and he has recently like defended his PhD, and he's now teaching at the University of East London. So over to you, Dr. Shailesh.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think. Thank you so much. I think. Of course, I wouldn't dare to summarize or to sort of repeat what you have just said. But then I think, as Bhupendra rightly pointed out, what you have said is, of course, in terms of the great in-depth insights of not only the way you started, which is of course like a literary critique, if I can use that term, which is picking up the variables and the words from the title itself, which I think gives us also ideas if tomorrow we have to sort of share our thoughts on certain topics like that. And then to move on towards what or how should we understand representation, democracy, self-representation, the values of self-representation, and then moving on to these different, I think, principles that you outlined by which we can understand the ideas and anti-caste struggles of, I think, Manyavar Kanshi Ram. I think that will be very, very helpful for us in the way we can take these lessons as learning to move forward. So now we have got some more in a way, audience members who have joined lately. So of course, I do appreciate that it's midnight in India. and of course, thank you so very much for joining us at this hour of the day. But then if quickly we can have a short introduction for those who have joined late. And then by that time, if others can think of the questions or responses if they have any, then we'll just collect very few questions. Of course, we won't want you to stay longer. So we'll just quickly collect questions, maybe 2 or 3 questions. And that's it. So if all of you who joined late, if you can just quickly introduce yourself, that would be wonderful.
Their representation in bureaucracy was negligible. As far as comparison to Uttar Pradesh is concerned, because in Uttar Pradesh bureaucracy was somewhere. If I begin in 1978, there were at least 11 lakh employees in all, and if you go by 21% of reservation, then we can have at least 2 lakh to 4 lakh Dalits who were employed in different types of state bureaucracy. There were 2 very big central employees departments like railways. And UP being the biggest state, and actually, there were railway offices everywhere, and because of that also, there were Dalit employees in Uttar Pradesh with a central institution. And the second was Post and Telegraph. And Post and Telegraph helped Manyavar Kanshi Ram as far as his communication was concerned. So, I first cause of lack of development of Bahujan Samaj Party in Punjab is lack of bureaucracy, Dalit bureaucracy. The second is of course land. As far as land is concerned in Uttar Pradesh, Dalits have 1 to 4 acres of land, and they relied much more on their land acquisition, and that's where there was independent assertion of the Dalits, because they were not on the dependent on the upper caste, and therefore they could help. Third, I will say religion. I think Sikhism blurs or cushions the pain of exclusion. As far as atrocities on the Dalits in Uttar Pradesh, they were of a very different order. As far as exclusion was concerned, the untouchability, the practice of untouchability, all that contributed to the high level of alienation from the Hinduism. But in Punjab, Sikhism blurs the plane of exclusion, and at least they were included in if Langar committee was not for them, or if the Tatkal committee was not for them, at least they were in the Gurdwaras, not outside the Gurdwara. And therefore, I think that also was one of the reasons because of which this exclusion could not come of that level where they could organize politically. I think these are few reasons because of which, Bahujan Samaj Party could not grow there. Now, the second question is the system is relevant or not, I still feel that the type of organization Manyavar envisaged was much more attuned to Baba Saheb Ambedkar's, Baba Saheb Ambedkar's movement. If you go by Bahishkrit, if you go by Mook Nayak or Bahishkrit Bharat, Bahishkrit Hitkarni Sabha, and if you come to Samta Sainik Dal and then Independent Labour Party or Scheduled Caste Federation, I think Manyavar Kanshi Ram tried to copy Baba Saheb Ambedkar. And in that context, he was very much clear that we should have our own media, and he started with his media, and he ran that media. He said that, look, our icons will be different, and he had his icons. Education was the fulcrum. He established universities. And I think, Baba Saheb Ambedkar was quite clear when he talked about the democracy, one man, one vote, one value. I think he relied on that because we have majority. And therefore, if we can organize our voters and not relying on the business class, one vote and one note, that was the slogan on the basis of which he organized, not depending on any of the business houses, Tata, Birlas, Ambanis, or Adani's. He had, and still they don't have, they may be clandestinely something doing, but they don't have, outright to. And therefore, I think still, if we really want to have our own organization, and organization has to be funded, from where it will be funded? It will be funded by the people themselves. And that is why I think people were at the forefront, and therefore I think this type of politics is required. Because if you depend upon the business houses, they will dictate the policies and the programs. And that is why when Mayawati came to power, she had PPP model, where it was not total privatization. It was PPP model in which the state had organized either it was expressway or Formula One race or any other colleges or universities or even super specialty hospitals. I think this and commitment to Buddhism, commitment to Buddhism with Buddhist circuit and Buddhist university and also Buddhist library, research center. I think that is based on the ideology. So I think this type of ideology, this type of iconography, this type of identity is required. Only then and then only we need a social transformation. Okay, yeah, intersectionality is a very different question, and I know Eurocentrism and Western philosophers are much more into it, but for me, I think self-representation becomes very important. And we say that, and I learned from Manyavar Kanshi Ram, जिसका मुद्दा उसकी लड़ाई उसकी अगुवाई. I think the fight will be with the leadership of the person who is suffering. Nobody else will come and represent her or him. And therefore, I think it's very important that those who are suffering, they should come forward to lead themselves. But there are examples, many examples. What happened to Savitribai Phule? You can imagine Savitribai Phule's father must have named what a revolutionary name. And and that to 1970s and 80s, she must have kept the name, but what after? You are ready to go for power. So I think politics is totally different ball game than movement. I think I will go first for the representation in the movement itself, then politics. That will be my take. I think there was some question by Bhupender.
Yeah, it was around nature of caste and I think nature of democracy and how caste
I
should
think
change.
one thing is for me, I don't see that Manyavar wanted to break the caste. Manyavar wanted to unite the caste. And he said that look, there are 3,743 castes for the OBCs and there are 2,111 castes for the scheduled caste. And I could have only united 300 castes. And within 300 castes, I have turned the table. So if I unite 1,000 castes, then what will happen? So I think instead of going into the details of caste and casteism, I think we need to look at the caste in person is okay. In their personal life it is okay. It should not be used in the universal institutions which are based on universalistic values of equality, liberty, fraternity.
Thank you so much, sir, for your responses. I would like to now invite Dr. Shrikant Boka for the vote of thanks. Oh, you have one question?
Yeah,
Thank you so much.